Look, Andrew, what an amazing job on this film. First of all, Minamata, I had no idea really about this story. And by the end of this film, I was in tears when Hiroyuki Sanada was giving that final speech. It really is this sense of inspiration that you're left with at the end of this film. But I know you have a photography background, and I know that you were teaching at New York University. Gene Smith, he really captures the human spirit in his photos. And I know that you're a photographer as well. Can you talk to me about Gene Smith's work, just kind of in general, and your knowledge of his work prior to the film?
Sure. So, at a really young age, I recall seeing specifically the Minamata work. I may have seen other Smith work, but it didn't stick with me in that same way. And
right.
At the time, it's funny because, you go make a film like this and you have all this recall and, it's hard to know how it all went over the years, but,
sure.
It stuck with me because I had seen the picture of Tomoko in the bath with her mother. And I remember, I was 10 or 12 years old or something. And I wasn't devastated by it. And it was weird at the time. I just remember thinking like, I should be really upset looking at this photograph, looking at this image, but for some reason, I don't feel as heartbroken as I should, like what's going on here. And years later, and I studied, photography and art, and I learned more about Smith, and I became, more aware of his work in general, and also just had a better comprehension of what you're actually looking at and why. Right. I realized that even at a young age, like his work, it's so clear that it speaks to you, and that hope, that humanity, that love, which is the thing that we all want and need. It's the thing that makes us human. It's the thing that makes life tolerable, frankly, is so present. And it pops even more and comes even more clear when it's, juxtaposed with the absolute worst of humanity. And so, for us making this film, there were a lot of challenges, but one of the big ones, of course, was, gosh, how do you interpret this work? Yeah. And how do you remake this work? And do justice to, of course, the victims and the patients and the people that need our help now around the world, not just in Minamata, but also, how do you look at this amazing artist and the work that he did and the important work that he did and replicate it in some way? But fortunately, I had a million frames or something, whereas he had, one to take that image anyway, or to express that image. So we had some extra tools that he may not have had.
I want to talk about that for a second, because the visual storytelling in this is very unique compared to other films I've seen. You find really creative ways to kind of capture these famous images and the stories behind them. I was wondering, can you talk to me about that a little bit, and how your background as a photographer helped that a little bit?
Sure. So it's quite interesting on this film, and probably on most of my film projects. I think without having to be part of the interview process, in talking to cinematographers and talking to production designers and talking to actors, I inevitably end up with painters and photographers on my crew, in front and behind the camera. And this film was no different. So almost everyone there was a painter.
Really?
And most of them also played around with photography. And so, there was just a real kind of discourse there ongoing about how to do these things in a really collective effort. But, primarily, one of the challenges was making sure that the audience could understand the language that of a photographer, right? So I've gotten so many wonderful letters and notes and things on social media from other photographers, incredibly successful ones, who were really pleased with the way that we showed process, the way that we expressed it, and shared it. But I also wanted to make sure that someone who's just used to shooting with an iPhone also could understand what goes into it and finding it and all that. So I needed to, me and Benoit, my cinematographer, Tom Foden, my production designer, we needed to build a situation or a strategy where we could kind of teach an audience our tools, basically. So that as we progress further in the film and Gene Smith moves from basically being in front of our camera to behind our camera, and the perspective of the film shifts to be exclusively about the victims, the patients, and the real heroes on the ground. And he just becomes our eyes in. That we could make that work and have everyone feel satisfied when you get to the image at the end that you're talking about. And I think the fact that we had a comfort with the camera certainly played into it. I mean, we were able to geek out on those things for ourselves.
Absolutely. Now, you brought up a really good point here, because I didn't really notice it, and it was really cool that this kind of happens. But we're introduced to this story through Gene Smith, but as the story progresses, it's really about Minamata. Can you talk to me about the balancing act of that a little bit in the film, of really focusing on Minamata and having the Gene Smith character kind of take a step back, and we do become kind of a Gene throughout the course of the story?
Sure. So firstly, it starts with the fact that I had an actor that's a global superstar that was willing to not be in front of the camera all the time. That's unusual. He was willing and understood who the real stars of the film were, the stars of the story. And so having that kind of agreement up front before we even started down this path was incredibly important. Ultimately, this is a film about those heroes, and they're meant to inspire everyone out there, people that are, people who are voiceless, people who haven't found a way through. I mean, it's a struggle to be alive. It's a struggle to put it together, and we're all victims of industrial pollution, really.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and so it kind of just happened naturally. Honestly, like it wasn't complex in editorial because we built it that way. I mean, we built it so that, you're with Smith, he's your eyes in. And the gift of doing it that way is that when we come around, we're able to do things that are visually unique because and interpretive and poetic because we're working through Gene's eyes. So we've now taught you about Gene's eyes. We've given you our language and his language. And now second half of the film, you can sort of enjoy what it would feel like. I've always wondered, like, what would it feel like to have this other person's eyeballs in my head? If I was looking at the world truly through someone else's eyes physically, what would that feel like? Not metaphorically, but really doing it. And that was our goal. And so, as the movie progresses, you get further into his mind's eye and really see what he sees. And it was really nice to be able to do it. And I think it also, because he naturally sees the beauty and the hope and the love, we were able to express that in a way when even when you're tackling a more complex subject matter, you don't want to look away because it's still beautiful.
Absolutely. And you know what, Andrew, I actually completely forgot Johnny Depp was in this movie, because Johnny Depp is not in this movie. That is Eugene Smith. And it's quite incredible, not just the physical transformation, but his whole ability to kind of just shift and become a different person. Can you talk to me about working with Johnny and the collaboration process with Johnny?
Sure. So, Johnny and I, we got together, a mutual, actually agents put us together and said, you guys have the same sort of, a lot of the same interests, and you speak the same language. You should get together. And was supposed to be one of these half an hour Hollywood meetings. And I'm like showing up all covered in paint and stuff, walking out of my studio, and I go sit down with him, and 9 hours later, like, we've agreed to go make a film, but we've barely talked about the film.
Right.
All we did was use literary references and art references and photography references, and we were just talking, and also why make this film? Why now? And from that point on, we got quite involved in every detail. I must have put 1,000 pages of reading and 50 documentaries in front of Johnny. I made him shoot with certain cameras and shoot certain ways, and just really pushed him to become the guy. And he sort of has a lot of Gene Smith in him already, that sort of light, that light won't be extinguished, that hope, that love. So he brought quite a bit to it. But then when it came to being on set, our team was so dialed in and everyone was pulling in the same direction. We all knew why we were making the film and what the point was. So we created these 360-degree environments where, not just Johnny, but all of our actors could step onto our set or step into our town or, wherever we were shooting and really just live and exist and be those characters and not feel that they had a technical responsibility to camera. Our responsibility was to them. And I think that's why you see such beautiful work from Johnny.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Another performance I was impressed by was, I hope I don't butcher her name, Minami. Is that correct? Wow, she blew me away as Eileen. I just have to ask you, what did she bring to the role that wasn't necessarily on the page?
Sure. So Minami's incredibly special. And I hope that other filmmakers will get the real treat of working with her. She's this very sort of small and sensitive and quiet woman. But the second that you turn the camera on her, you see something that walking down the street you don't see. It is this immense sort of power and intelligence and just inner strength that just jumps out at you, and confidence. And you really have to put the camera right there to see it, and it's quite remarkable. I mean, I remember I auditioned hundreds of actresses, and she came in, and I was just thinking to myself, this isn't the person. And then I started looking through my lens, and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing and what she was expressing, because it's so subtle. But the camera, of course, picks it up. And it's not that it wasn't on the page, but it was a really difficult thing to find in a woman from the early 70s. So a Japanese actress in particular. So, this is a woman who had this unbelievable strength. She was from two different cultures. And, she had a will that was in direct conflict with societal norms and customs where she was from. And so it was just a unique makeup of a human being. And Minami, much like Johnny with Hope and Gene, sort of had that. She had that ability to give you that traditional Japanese woman from 1972, but also that other thing, that thing that's beneath so many of those women in real life at that time, but that they often didn't show. And it was an absolute, we did a screen test with the two of them, and everyone just couldn't believe what we were seeing. It was just fantastic.
Yeah, incredible performances. Hiroyuki Sanada as well, man. Everybody in this film just knocks it out of the park. Now, the last question I have for you is that this film, to me, is really about the bravery of speech and the truth and power. Truth of power. Can you talk to me about what you're hoping audiences take away from Minamata?
Sure. So that's absolutely right. We're in a world where, unfortunately, the powers that be, right? Money, greed, big corporations, even in our industry, whether it's media, whether it's entertainment, obviously in all big tech, in all these areas, they are making judgments, placing judgment, deciding a lot for individuals, and it's not on our behalf. It's not for the benefit of us as a society.
Right.
And my real hope for this film is that all of us who feel, just trying to get food on the table for our kids, trying to have time with our partners, just trying to find joy and survive, that we realize that we're really not in it together, right? These are global issues, and we have the power. And if we stand up and we are heard, the end credit sequence, there's a song, One Single Voice. And it's true. If one single voice can start a tidal wave, one little ripple can start a wave, one match starts a forest fire. And that's the thing, we have that power inside of us to speak for ourselves. And I think it requires us to be uplifted and sort of own our own power and live the way that we should.
Absolutely. Well, look, I think this movie is incredible. your visual language is amazing. I am stunned, and I'm so happy I actually got to watch this movie. But what an incredible journey, and I'm so happy that I was educated in this. And I just wanted to thank you for your time, man. It was a fantastic film. Thank you.